So I'm here next to O'Brien's Tower. Now, O'Brien's Tower was built in 1835 by a local landlord called Cornelius O'Brien. Now, Cornelius O'Brien was quite a wealthy man. He owned 10,000 acres of land, and that's a huge amount of land for someone to own back then. And he lived just down the road from the cliffs down to the south in a place called Birchfield House. So throughout his life he was very familiar with the cliffs and saw great potential here for tourism. So he decided to build this tower. Now, many people think this tower might have been a lighthouse or maybe for military purposes, but it was technically called a folly. And a folly was a place for entertainment. So Cornelius O'Brien, being a high status man of his generation, a member of Parliament, had many friends in business and politics, and he'd bring special guests up here for singing and dancing and wining and dining. Now, this was all around the time of the Great Irish Famine, so Ireland was battling against starvation and poverty and emigration at the time. And landlords were the only people with the economic and political influence to help the distress of the poor around the time of the famine. Now, many landlords didn't rise to the task, but Cornelius O'Brien was one of the great exceptions. He managed to secure government funding to enhance the educational opportunities of his people. He also secured funding to improve local infrastructure, and this helped connect the area surrounding townlands. He provided year-round employment to locals who worked on his huge estate, and he also provided financial assistance to tenants to improve their farms. And that last bit is quite interesting because back during those times, landlords were often quite mean to their tenants. They'd evict tenants who couldn't afford to pay rent. One thing to note about Ireland back then is while it in general was going through a state of misery, this area was actually starting to flourish thanks to Cornelius O'Brien.
This wall was an idea of Cornelius O'Brien. He said to the local guy that was building the tower for him in 1835 that he was going to build a wall to be a mile long, 6 foot high, 2 inches in thickness. So the builder said there's no wall that will be 2 inches in thickness going to stand up with the weather you're going to get here. But Cornelius had a different idea, that he was going to put a bank at the far side of the flagstone, and he'd sink them into the ground maybe 12 inches. So the bet was that he'd do the wall, and the guy building the tower would have to do £200 worth of work on the tower to pay him back the bet. And Cornelius won the bet because he put the wall here. That's how the wall became known as the wall, to protect the people from being blown over the cliffs.
Hi, we're just standing here at the top close to O'Brien's Tower. Now, this tower here on my left was built by Cornelius O'Brien back in 1835. Now, all the infrastructure you'll see in this area was mainly responsible by Cornelius O'Brien. He was a member of the British Parliament for 20 years, and he was obviously able to get the funding for the various infrastructure parts. Now, further down the road, he also built and renovated St. Bridget's Well. He renovated the rustic seating where people could sit and reflect, and he also renovated the well house. Now, there's a story told that at one stage Cornelius O'Brien wasn't very well, and somebody brought holy water from this well, and apparently it cured him. And ever since, people have been coming in huge numbers to visit St. Bridget's Well. And about a mile down the road, he also built a rustic structure there a reliever well where people would stop off to basically replenish for themselves, for fresh water for their animals and for themselves. And I'm sure it was a place of regalia where people exchange different stories. Quite close to that as well, he was also responsible for building a national school down the road. It was built in 1845, and obviously he saw the importance of educating the local people, that they would have a certain standard of education to assist them on their route through life. Again, funding coming from the British government, he was able to build O'Brien's Bridge, which was a major piece of infrastructure, commissioned in 1833 and finished in 1836. Now, failure to have not built that bridge would have meant that locals would have to travel maybe up to 15 kilometres of a circuit to transact business in the business town in Estymon. So that was a major piece of infrastructure, and many of us pass through that bridge every day, and it's still intact today. So he made a huge contribution to this area in terms of infrastructure. He's left an indelible mark in this whole area as well. And further down the road, of course, he built his own mansion there, Birchfield House, in 1816, which is a real palatial, fabulous building, surrounded by huge birch trees. And there again, he dined and wined many of his guests there.
In 1873, a young amateur engineer, fresh off the boat from Ireland, slipped and fell on a busy Boston street. At first glance, it was an unfortunate start to his new life in the United States. However, as he recovered, he began to work on an invention that would change man's relationship with the sea forever.
In 1880, the idea of building a craft that could go underwater for extended periods of time must have seemed crazy.
He had a dream, he had a vision, and as each success got bigger and better, so did his dreams.
John Holland has a place front and center in the history of submarines. He started it all.
Like his invention, Holland's story has been hidden from view. It is time to dive deep into the depths of history and discover the truth of his remarkable story.
John Holland's idea and his design established the United States Navy submarine force.
A story of Irish revolutionaries, British spies, and war profiteers. But above all, a story of the forgotten genius.
Come all you young Irishmen who walk upon the land, their feats and deeds and their fairy creeds, that you might understand. There is one of them that comes to mind, the likes was never seen. He was John of Philip Holland, who invented the submarine. Manor he was born in the wild west coast of Clare. Not far from the cliffs of Moher that hangs so high in the air, Liscannor Bay stretches far away from Hag's Head to Reneen. It was there, old man, he formed the plan, and they called her the submarine. For 14 years he thought it home in his own dear native land, till in migration he sailed away into a foreign strand. In Paterson, New Jersey, on his work he became quite keen. The boat and shaw could go below, and they called her the submarine. The U.S. Navy thought the man was crazy. They thrown his plan one side, but Holland paid no heed to them in his boat beneath the tide. Down below, where only fishes go, the York was plain to be seen. It was John Philip Holland inside his first submarine. In the year of 1914, the year of the Great War, a death appeared in the papers. It was read both near and far. That man, he died in poverty, but he did realize his dream. He was John Philip Holland who invented the submarine. Come all you sailors, both young and old, and listen unto me. You'll go to boat that will go afloat below under the sea. Be you Russian, Cuban, Austrian, Australian, or Philippine. Raise your glass in the air for the man from Clare who invented the submarine.
Now, there are certain places in County Clare which are famous for, in fact, synonymous with almost stone and flagstone. Liscannor stone, for instance, is unique to the county. It's hard-wearing and it's used in a variety of ways, both indoors and outdoors. Liscannor stone is still being quarried in the Manor, and Anya Lally went to meet a family who've had a Liscannor flagstone quarry in their family for generations now.
Liscannor Flagstone Quarries is one of the quarries located in County Clare. This particular quarry, which is based in Rockmount in Milltown Malbay, is operated by the O'Connor family, who have been quarrying and supplying Liscannor stone to the Irish market for many years. Liscannor stone, which is famous for its fossilised markings, is found here and in the surrounding area.
Well, this is the famous Liscannor stone. It's called a flagstone because it breaks off in these thin layers, and each layer is a depositional unit. This is all comprised of sediment, and the sediment would have been deposited here somewhere around 320 million years ago. Okay, so it's a very, very old landscape, if you like, and all the sediment here and as far up at the cliffs of Moher and further south all the way down to Shannon Estuary, they were all part of one large delta. It has an enormous appeal and it has for had a long time. First of all, the thickness of it, it comes in a variety of thicknesses naturally, so you can use it for different purposes. But also the main feature is the pattern that these trace fossils have on the surface. They are like a work of art. They're almost like Celtic patterns in the sandstone, but they're completely natural. I know a couple of people have got the idea that when they see these things, they're actually man-made or they're hand-carved or something. They're absolutely not. They're formed by organisms burrowing through the mud, and this is just a pattern they leave.
Now, for us, obviously having our machines, our rock breakers, we are able to get down to this level of rock here, which is the main bed of flagstone. Once we get to this area of flagstone, we basically use the same techniques as my forefather would have used, namely a hammer, wedge and a crowbar, because as you can see at the front of the bench here, we have the quarry. It's segmented into different layers. So what we would do is we would drive our wedges in along this layer here, slowly loosening the stone. It's a very slow process. Once we loosened the sheet of stone, we'd use our crowbar and lever the sheet up, and then we would drive in our teleporter and take out a sheet of flagstone and bring it back up to the sheds where we'd process it. It's a very slow process. I mean, if I was to stand over here, I mean, this section here, we started 2 years ago. So it just gives you an idea, 2 years from here to here, as to how slow the process is.
I'm joined here at the Falls Hotel in Ennistown now by Dr. Eamon Doyle, geologist at the Burn and Cliffs of Moher Geopark. And Eamon, a table of rocks to the uneducated eye, but some fascinating stories in what's here in front of us. These an example of, I guess, the fascinating geology and landscape around us.
Yeah, we have a huge history of geology here. The rocks in the Burn and around the area are, let's round it off to 300 million years old, so it's important to remember that we've, the Burn and the Cliffs of Moher area has been a long time in the making. And the fossils that we find here tell us really interesting stories about what actually was going on and where we were 300 million years ago.
Talk to me about this one first of all, because this is a recent discovery.
The first one that you just pointed out there, Gavin, is actually a fossil shark tooth. And for those who can see, it's about 2 centimeters in height. And this was found very recently from near Doyle. I found it myself. I was very fortunate to find it. We've never had anything like this found before from this area. So we had these sharks swimming in the sea that was Doyle 310 million years ago. And in size, it would have been a bit less than a metre, maybe 60 or 70 metres in length, this actual shark swimming around the place.
Big.
Yeah, quite big, yeah.
And it looks like it's embedded in kind of again, what looks almost like shale rock or...
Exactly, it is in shale, and this is just one of the teeth. They're very rare. There's a few others reported from Northern Ireland, and then the rest of Europe and UK have them, but in Ireland they're actually very, very rare indeed for this particular age.
And that's 315 million years
315 million years has been sitting there. So the shark obviously died, and then the rest of the skeleton, because sharks don't have a bony skeleton, they're cartilage, that is very difficult to preserve and is rarely preserved, but the teeth often do get preserved. But this is a fascinating find.
And this is a similar looking one as well then?
Yes, this is actually found from the same area, and this is a spiral shell, so it looks like basically a snail, but these were mollusks, so they would have been swimming around in the sea. So they would have been like little octopus. They would have had tentacles coming out. They would have been jet propelled. They would have been squirting water out and swimming around. And they were active hunters. So they had eyes, and they would have been catching little fish and other swimming organisms. But the fascinating thing is, now that we found a shark that we know is swimming around there is a real possibility that the sharks were actually hunting these and eating these.
Wow.
We have evidence from elsewhere in Europe where they've found sharks' teeth stuck in these shells. We've nothing quite like that here yet, but the real possibility exists that these guys were predator and prey. So we've now...
They were enemies, and now here they are beside each other at the table.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a couple of other bits here as well, just to bring our listeners up to speed.
Yeah, so these rocks are telling us we were in the sea. So where we were now, of course, we weren't here, we were down near the equator.
Yeah.
This is a part, so not only was it 315 million years ago, we weren't even where we are now. We were down near the equator, and we've since drifted up to where we are over the past 300 million years. So a lot of the time was the sea, but then the sea shallowed for a lot of different reasons. Sediment built out, make a delta, and it became land. And here's proof that we have land, because we have fossilized roots which are preserved in the rock.
Wow.
So we know there was tree-like plants growing there. They were quite large, some of them. They would have been 10, 20 meters high, some of these things. And there's networks of roots preserved in place. And of course, these roots were growing in what was basically soil. So that tells us there was land.
And this then, does this tell us that Iceland used to be a lot closer to us?
I'm afraid not. It doesn't. But what it does tell us is that this is a bit of pumice. So it's volcanic rock that was ejected from a volcano. And this was also found very recently near Doyle, and this has come from a volcano in Iceland called Katla. And these get distributed around the North Atlantic when Katla erupts, and it's been erupting for the past 8,000 years intermittently. And these ones are found near archaeological evidence, so we know these ones came around 6,000 years ago. And the possibility is that the early humans that were in Clare were picking up these and collecting them and using them to polish. So making materials, making polish and stuff, we know from other locations that they've done. And currently Michael Lynch, the archaeologist, is working on this site to try and develop what the people were actually doing here.
The stories, you've explained it very well, of just 4 different looking stones in front of us. But are you still, through this work, learning more about the way back history of the area in which we are in now?
That's exactly what we're doing. So every little thing that we find helps. And there are other people working on it as well, but it's great that I can go out and find material, because what I can do then is make that available, make that information available to people. And right on cue, we have just published our latest publication, Stone, Mortar and Isogeology Trip to the Burn. And that is a guided tour for lots of different sites. Most of them will have signs up, and there's information in that which explains the whole story in an easy-to-read format and gives you the most up-to-date information about the geological history.
And that brings me to the question I wanted to ask you finally. Is there a market, or a bigger market, maybe one that's not being exploited, of come to the Burren? I mean, we know that it's got a unique landscape, but come to the Burren and learn about history from so far back, but actually see it before your eyes.
That is one of the big topics of the whole geopark movement, is this education about rock history, earth history. So that's one of the things we're trying to promote. So we'd like to get through this booklet and through educating and through promotion through the local business already there, so they have a full understanding of the thing. So it's through them. So it's people bringing out guides, guided walks, cycling tours, kayaking tours, wherever. They are learning about the geology. So the evening course we have, it's just finished for this year with the Burn Outdoor Education Centre. We had local businesses there coming and learning about the geology. So now they are in a position to develop that and develop their own products.
It's fascinating stuff, and it's great to see that people buy into it, spread the word, and then everybody becomes more excited about this area.
Yes, it is, and we're doing it through the schools as well. Lister and Varna Secondary School are presenting to the geopark groups tomorrow in the pavilion, and we've also got the National School and Lister Varna posters to promote this as well. So we're going right through the whole thing, from schools right through to the visitors, and everybody in between.
Professor Eamon Doyle, appreciate the snapshot. Thanks for joining us this morning.
You're very welcome, Kevin. Thanks.